Destiny 2. Over 38 million copies sold and nearly $200 million in revenue each and every year. I myself have put countless hours into this franchise and wish to speak on an issue that is important to gamers, parents, and guardians alike. Hello, my name is William Mueller, and today I will be speaking on some of the psychological techniques used by Bungie developers to keep Destiny 2 players addicted. Now, some preliminary notes. While many of the psychological techniques discussed here today are applicable to other games, I wish to limit the scope of this video strictly to Destiny 2, as I myself have spent significantly more time in the Destiny franchise and believe I can present a more accurate picture of what the typical player experience is like. On that note, I have played Destiny 2 for roughly 2,200 hours while amassing multiple achievements only acquired by the elite of the Destiny community. In my prime, I was within the top 1% of the Destiny 2 player base for several activities and worked for a company that paid me to play Destiny 2. With that out of the way, let's dive in. The first question one must ask is, why does Bungie want players to stay addicted to Destiny 2? And a large part of that answer is money. The live service gaming model is one that has sprung up over the past 15 years or so, and has significantly changed the landscape of AAA video games. A live service video game is any game in which developers continually create and release content on a timeline beyond what is offered at its original release date. This content is often sold as DLC or downloadable content. Across its lifespan, Destiny 2 has always been monetized, but this monetization has increased heavily over the past few years. Originally, Destiny 2 released a new $60 DLC every year, but now, in addition to the yearly DLC, Bungie has broken their content into smaller pieces which are fed to players through season passes, dungeon keys, and the like. Taking this into the context of a player's time spent on Destiny 2, if Bungie can influence a player to spend more time in-game, this gives them more opportunities to plaster the all-too-common message advertising the most recent DLC, dungeon, or season pass for purchase. In fact, upon opening the game, a player will be greeted once every week with a message detailing the most recent cosmetic items on sale in the Destiny 2 item shop. With all this in mind, it should be clear that money has guided many of the decisions Bungie has made with how their game functions. Now, we will dive into the psychological techniques used by Bungie. RNG. RNG stands for Random Number Generator. Imagine a wheel that spins and chooses a random number within a set range of values. The second term, Variable Rate Reinforcement, means the number of required responses from an individual, so a player like me, to be awarded something varies. In the context of Destiny 2, one way in which players earn loot is by killing mobs of enemies. Variable Rate Reinforcement comes in because it decides what amount of enemies they will need to kill in order to be awarded a piece of armor or a weapon. The way it decides is through RNG. The wheel spins and lands on 20. Now, that player will need to kill 20 enemies in order to get their next drop. After they've achieved that, the wheel will spin again and select a new number. However, throughout this entire time, the player never knows how many enemies they will need to kill in order to get that next drop. This has obvious parallels to the gambling industry and gets at the psychology of the human person. Humans are attracted to variability. We enjoy spinning a slot machine unsure of whether we are going to win it big. And this comes from possibility. Each time I spin the slot machine, each time I kill an enemy in Destiny 2, I have the possibility of getting that next epic drop, that perfect gun I've been chasing. I have the possibility of hitting the jackpot. The near-miss phenomenon, as coined by R.L. Reid, a psychology professor at the University of Exeter, states that a near miss is a special kind of failure to reach a goal, one that comes close to being successful. A near miss encourages the player by indicating that success may be within reach. I see this phenomenon take root in Destiny 2 through the loot system particularly. Within Destiny 2, when a player receives a piece of armor or a weapon, they don't simply get that item. The item comes with perks. Perks are features on an item that change how the item performs. For example, there is a weapon perk called Appended Mag, which slightly increases the magazine size of any gun. On the left, we can see a gun called the Palindrome Adept. The logos outlined in red on the left-hand side represent the perks that rolled with this particular palindrome. However, as we can see on the right-hand side, this image details all the possible combination of perks available to the palindrome. When a player is trying to acquire a gun or armor piece in Destiny 2, it isn't enough to simply acquire the item. The player also has to get the correct combination of perks that particular player desires. A single perk on a weapon or armor piece can matter so much that it is the difference between and one should now be able to make the connection between this and the near-miss phenomenon. When a player receives a weapon which is just one or a few perks off from being perfect, they have just achieved what could be regarded as a near-miss. Players then are encouraged by the prospect of getting that perfect gun to play more and more. To give some real-life support for how pervasive this phenomenon is, I can recall talking to a player I met through Discord who had pursued getting one gun for over 6 months. While he had received many versions of the gun in that time, he was never satisfied with its perk combinations and thus continued searching. The final aspect I wish to speak on is superstition. In an experiment set up by a psychologist named B.F. Skinner, Skinner placed pigeons in kennels where he would feed them at predetermined times throughout the day. What he observed is that often, whatever action the pigeon was performing at the time when the food was served would then be repeated in the hope of spawning more food. The pigeons behaved as if there was a causal relationship between their doing said action and the food being presented. In real life, there are clear examples of this. In gambling, people commonly blow on dice before rolling. In sports, players often perform rituals before the game. Fans of sports often wear lucky items of clothing when going to a game. The list goes on and on. In a Destiny 2 forum titled, "How to Get Good RNG Luck," countless players recall their experience pursuing a weapon or piece of armor as their main objective, while also having little to no success. However, in scenarios where the same players were simply completing an activity for the sake of helping a friend or some other reason in which that activity's loot was not of much value to them, they often observed they would receive those items within the first few tries. Their suggestion, ironically or not so ironically, is that one's degree of interest in getting a certain item directly affects the rate at which one will receive that item. While that may sound absurd initially, I believe there may be a bit more below the surface. In an article titled, "Destiny 2 has finally found the perfect RNG balance," Eric Switzer points out a top priority of Bungie developers. It's all about finding a balance between luck and deterministic acquisition. If people don't get enough gear, they get frustrated and stop playing. But if you give them too much gear, they run out of things to pursue and stop playing. Going back to what was said by players on the forum, why couldn't Bungie developers program Destiny 2 in such a way that it would award you loot more or less often based on your playing preferences? If you play multiplayer more often, then it would award you loot less often relative to all other activities. This is because Bungie knows you clearly have an interest in playing multiplayer, and therefore will keep coming back to it. I don't believe this proposition is unreasonable, especially when one considers the recent advancements made with AI technology. In fact, I think it is completely reasonable to believe that the experience I have of acquiring loot in Destiny 2 has been tailored to me. While all this at its core is speculation, what is certain is that superstition takes hold in both pigeons and players alike, and clearly it is working in Bungie's favor. Overall, I hope it is clear that while video games can be addictive in their own right, it is naive to think that steps are not being taken on the part of developers in order to tap into the human psyche. In this video, we explored how Bungie has utilized variable rate reinforcement, the near-miss phenomenon, and superstition, all to influence players to up their playtime. Ultimately, much of it comes back to monetization. More playtime means more opportunities to present ads to said players, thereby increasing their chance of making purchases. While this video may come off as highly critical of Bungie developers, and game developers more generally, I want to state that I still love Destiny 2, and it will always hold a special place in my heart. Personally, I enjoyed this project thoroughly, and am quite excited to see the related content that will inevitably come out in the near future. Thank you, and goodbye.